do you mean by tie me to the mast, and what are we talking about here?
Sure. So, as I do this, Mark mentioned, we really encourage you to ask questions. We want to make this interactive, make sure we address any issues or questions that you have. My guess is many questions are going to occur to you. All right, tie me to the mast. Those of us who actually were educated about Western civilization and read the classics, you already know what I'm talking about. This is the story of Odysseus, or Ulysses. I think it's the Romanized name for Odysseus, who was captaining a ship and was very aware of the fact that those who traversed that particular area of the ocean would be waylaid, would be called by the sirens, who had these wailing voices that attracted you to come toward the island, and then you would go up on these rocks and you would crash and everybody would drown. The strength of Odysseus, and here's the point, was that he knew he was weak. He didn't think he could withstand the sirens. He saw susceptibility and he did something about it. So what he did was he had his crew put stuffing in their ear so they wouldn't hear it, but he was the boss man and he was worried about what he would do. So he literally had his crew tie him to the mast so he couldn't intercede and try to steer the ship in the wrong direction. He knew that he was weak and susceptible. And isn't that the case? I mean, any one of us can develop some memory issues, some capacity issues, and some judgment issues. So again, to be proactive about this, by the way, the side note is there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about memory and aging and all of that. And I sent in a letter to the editor, somewhat tongue in cheek, somewhat real, where I basically said, hey, I told my kids, if I develop these really serious memory and capacity issues, tie me to the mast. Make sure that I don't go out there and make trouble and do something stupid. That's the source. That's from which it emanates. And, again, it's everybody's topic. Mark has some data on the number of individuals who suffer from advanced dementia. But, as we get older, we worry about memory. There's a lot of words. There's memory, there's capacity, and there's competency. They're different. They all have their nuances, and definitely they have significance when we're taking care of our lives, and certainly in the context of our legal planning documents.
Let's circle back. So capacity, you talked about statistics, and I was just looking at some recent statistics. Over 5.8 million Americans suffer from Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. And that's what we're talking about here when you have mental capacity issues. And I want to make one thing really clear. We are big believers that you should have the right to control your estate plan, to control your life until it's dangerous, until you really have capacity issues. Just because you have a diagnosis of certainly physical issues, if it's cancer or something like that, that doesn't mean you don't have capacity. You might be physically weakened. You can still absolutely likely manage your affairs. This is really mainly about dementia diagnosis, and when you're showing issues around memory and managing your affairs, that's really what we're talking about here. So we want to get clear, just because you get physically sick, you shouldn't lose the ability to make decisions.
Yeah, and you're actually making a point about ageism, that, is there an automatic assumption that because you're over 70, over 80, over 90, whatever, that suddenly you're not capable just because of your age, before anybody even talks to you, or they'll hear some words from you that if you said them when you were 50, nothing. But now that you're 80, oh boy, that shows
exactly. Or you're diagnosed with a different type of illness. Many of you may have seen my story. I went through my own cancer journey 4.5 years ago. The idea that you should lose the ability to make decisions just because you're diagnosed with some issue is absurd. But there are positions where it does matter. When you're showing signs, really, we're talking about more mental issues. When we talk about capacity, the ability to make decisions, can you go through how the law sort of defines that and why it's kind of a circular definition and a bit challenging?
I want to share first, because this is actually responsive to your question in very practical terms. I author a form book for other attorneys. A couple thousand attorneys around the country buy the form book. I co-author it with a couple of law professors, one in Florida, one in Kansas. And in the chapter on capacity, which I author, I wrote about the Ulysses Clause, which I created. So I signed a Ulysses Clause. So it says this, and again, this gets to Mark's question. It says, and I address it to my family, and I address it to my successor trustee in my trust. I address it to the person named in my durable power of attorney. I basically say, if I exhibit any of the following behaviors, I want you to intervene. I want you to speak up and ask me about it and pursue it. So often there is resistance and worry that you'll be you'll be overbearing, that you're intruding where you shouldn't be, that you're being ageist, that it's uncomfortable for you to challenge your parent or another loved one who is older or not older, but who is having these issues. So I'm trying to take responsibility for the issue. So mine says this. In part, it says, if I exhibit these behaviors, intervene. Number one, am I not paying bills, even though I always did pay my bills before? Am I paying the same bill 2 times, 3 times? Am I suddenly making gifts to charities that I never gave to before? Am I suddenly entering contests where I can win $2 million if I just send off $3,000? Am I doing something really stupid in that context? Am I suddenly making gifts to people I never made gifts to before? Am I signing documents and committing myself in ways that I never, ever, ever did before? And it's not on my list, but I certainly have told everybody that if I start to do crazy things driving my car, intervene. My point there is it doesn't say if I become incapacitated. It doesn't say if I have memory issues. It says if I exhibit these behaviors, hey, check it out. I mean, that's reality, and that's the approach that I think makes the most sense.
So it's looking for specific behaviors or issues, and from there, then maybe it's time to check it out. Because the issue of defining incapacity, it's challenging, and we know that we have some clients who have had a diagnosis of you have some dementia, but that doesn't mean they can't make decisions, right? They might have times of day where they can. Of course, we have to be extra careful. But just because you have a diagnosis doesn't mean you can't. So you're saying that a good approach is to say, hey, family, if you see these behaviors, then it's time maybe to check it out. And what would you say if a family does? Like, let's say, Dad, I see that you are driving erratically, or I see that you're paying bills 2 or 3 times. What should I do?
I would want you to talk with me and point this out. And if I'm in denial about it, that's a red flag to you. If I say, gee, you're right, I see that. You would hope, I would hope that would be my response. And we would talk about it. And maybe I don't know what I would do. Maybe I would say I should no longer be trustee of my trust, or, I want to limit the damage. I'll have a bank account in my name that only has $5,000 in it. Everything else is under somebody else's control. For many folks, by the way, when this issue comes up, many individuals will name maybe your kid, your successor trustee, as a co-trustee with you. And then in the trust, we can say 2 signatures are needed for any transaction involving $5,000 or more. $3,000, $8,000, $10,000. So that means that each person individually, each co-trustee, parent and child, can write a check to pay a bill, no big deal, but you're building in a level of control. What I like about that is you're not saying a person lacks capacity. You're saying, hey, good to have a little help and a little assistance here. Let's not have somebody conclude that you lack capacity, which most trusts say. They say if the creator of the trust is the trustee and they no longer have capacity in the context of managing the trust, they're to be removed and the next person takes over. You have to get doctor letters, whatever the trust may say. But again, a much more respectful way of dealing with this is to see about a resignation or, again, amending the trust so that somebody becomes a co-trustee with you. It's practical and it's gentle and it's respectful.
Absolutely. And I think it's really critical, of course, that you have your estate plan in place, of course, ahead of time. You have an up-to-date living trust, up-to-date powers of attorney. And I like that idea that just because you have a document in place doesn't mean that it's going to be all encompassing or perfect, that the idea of separating out finances and having smaller accounts you have control over, well, you can retain some control but limit damage. I like that idea. And the idea of co-trustees, where you say, look, I don't want to give up control, but I'm going to name my child or my spouse or someone to step in right away to oversee things with me. For those of you who haven't subscribed to our Gilfix Law YouTube channel, please do so. Very easy. You can just point your phone at this or just Gilfix Law on YouTube. We have hundreds of thousands of views now. We're in the thousands of subscribers. We're really excited about that. This video will be there if it's not already. And for those of you who have not, so subscribe. Easy to find us. Gilfix.com, 650-493-8070. So thank you so much, and we'll see you guys again very soon. Take care.